The sickening thud of a 12-year-old boy hitting concrete echoed through Maple Grove Avenue as Karen Hoffman stood over Jake Morrison's crumpled form, her HOA security badge gleaming in the afternoon sun. Blood trickled from the child's scraped elbow, staining the pristine sidewalk she claimed to protect. "Maybe next time you'll think twice about blocking public walkways," she spat, adjusting her uniform with satisfaction. Jake had been doing nothing more than waiting for his friend Marcus to finish his piano lesson 3 houses down. The quiet, overweight boy preferred standing near the lamppost outside his home rather than sitting on the front steps, where he felt too exposed to neighborhood gossip. His mother had taught him to be considerate, to stay out of people's way. But apparently, his very presence was offense enough for Officer Hoffman. The Morrison family had moved to Willowbrook Heights 6 months earlier, seeking a fresh start after Jake's father deployed overseas. Sarah Morrison worked double shifts at the hospital to afford their modest rental in the upscale community. Jake understood money was tight. He never complained about wearing the same 3 outfits to school or packing peanut butter sandwiches while his classmates enjoyed elaborate lunchboxes. He found solace in books, in quiet moments, in the hope that someday kids might see past his weight to the person underneath. Every afternoon at 3:30, Jake would position himself by the lamppost, backpack slung over one shoulder, watching for Marcus to emerge from Mrs. Chen's house. The routine comforted him. Stand quietly, wave when Marcus appeared, walk together to the corner store for a shared bag of chips. Simple pleasures that made middle school bearable. But Karen Hoffman had been watching too. As the newly appointed HOA Community Safety Officer, Karen took her duties seriously, perhaps too seriously. She patrolled the neighborhood like a military commander, citation book in hand, measuring grass heights with a ruler and photographing violations from multiple angles. Residents learned to dread the sound of her heavy footsteps on their driveways. "Excuse me." She had barked that first Tuesday, emerging from behind a perfectly manicured hedge. Jake startled, nearly dropping his math textbook. "You've been loitering here for 20 minutes. This sidewalk isn't designed to support—" She paused, eyeing his frame with undisguised contempt. "Extended occupancy." "I'm just waiting for my friend," Jake replied softly, taking a small step backward. "He'll be out soon." "Waiting can be done on private property, your family's property." Karen's voice carried the authority of someone unused to being questioned. "Move along." Jake glanced toward Mrs. Chen's house, then back at the intimidating woman before him. "Okay, sorry." He retreated to his front yard, cheeks burning with embarrassment. Through the living room window, he watched Marcus exit the piano lesson and look around confused before walking home alone. The confrontations escalated throughout the week. Wednesday brought accusations of deliberately obstructing foot traffic when Jake stood near the mailbox cluster. Thursday's offense was creating a safety hazard by apparently making joggers alter their path around him. By Friday, Karen's patience had evaporated entirely. "You again," she snarled, approaching with measured steps. "I thought we discussed your little sidewalk camping problem." "I'm not doing anything wrong," Jake said, voice barely above a whisper. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped his backpack straps. "I have a right to be here." "Rights," Karen laughed, a harsh sound that made nearby birds take flight. "Let me explain your rights. Kid, this is a private community with standards. Standards your family apparently doesn't understand." She stepped closer, her shadow engulfing Jake's small frame. "Look at you. Standing there, taking up half the sidewalk. Mrs. Patterson had to walk in the street yesterday because you were blocking her path." "That's not true," Jake protested, finally meeting her eyes. "Mrs. Patterson said hello to me. She didn't seem bothered." The contradiction ignited something dangerous in Karen's expression. Are you calling me a liar? Before Jake could respond, she placed her palm flat against his chest and shoved hard. The boy stumbled backward, arms windmilling for balance, backpack sliding off his shoulder, books scattered across the sidewalk as he struggled to stay upright. Karen, what the hell are you doing? The sharp voice belonged to David Kim, who had witnessed the altercation from his driveway across the street. He jogged over, helping Jake gather his scattered belongings. This is a child. This is a public safety issue, Karen replied without shame. The boy refuses to follow basic community guidelines. He's waiting for his friend. That's not illegal. It is when he's creating hazards. Karen's hand drifted to the citation book clipped to her belt. Perhaps his family needs a formal warning about loitering violations. I'm sure the fines will help them understand proper sidewalk etiquette. David's face flushed with anger. You're threatening to fine a 12-year-old for standing on a public sidewalk. I'm maintaining community standards. Karen turned her attention back to Jake, who was clutching his rescued textbooks against his chest. Next time I see you planted here like a roadblock, there will be consequences. Real consequences. The following Monday brought those consequences. Jake had hoped the weekend might cool Karen's animosity. He'd even considered skipping his daily wait for Marcus, but his mother had always taught him not to let bullies dictate his actions. Stand tall, sweetheart, she would say. You have just as much right to exist in this world as anyone else. At 3:25, Jake took his familiar position by the lamppost. He'd barely settled his backpack when Karen appeared, moving with predatory purpose. But this time, she wasn't alone. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced loudly, addressing the handful of neighbors retrieving mail or tending gardens. I want you all to witness what happens when someone repeatedly ignores community safety protocols. Jake felt every eye in the vicinity turn toward him. Heat crept up his neck as Karen continued her performance. This individual has been repeatedly warned about blocking pedestrian access. Despite multiple citations and verbal warnings, he continues to endanger our community by creating obstacles for emergency vehicles, joggers, and elderly residents. That's not true, Jake said, voice cracking slightly. I've never been cited for anything. Are you contradicting an official report? Karen pulled out her citation book with theatrical flair. Because I have documentation right here, proving your pattern of non-compliance. She flipped through blank pages, as if reading detailed incident reports. October 15th, blocking foot traffic. October 16th, creating safety hazards. October 17th, refusing to comply with lawful orders. Each fabricated entry made Jake's stomach clench tighter. Those aren't real, he whispered. What did you say? Karen stepped closer, voice dropping to a menacing growl. Speak up, son. Everyone here deserves to hear your excuses. I said those aren't real citations. Jake's voice grew stronger, fueled by indignation. You never gave me any paperwork. You're making this up. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Karen's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a dangerous purple. You little... Karen, that's enough. Margaret Patterson emerged from her house, walker clicking against the sidewalk. At 83, she commanded respect through sheer force of personality. Leave the boy alone. Mrs. Patterson, I'm handling an official HOA matter. Karen replied through gritted teeth. This doesn't concern you. It concerns me when you're harassing children in my neighborhood. Margaret positioned herself between Karen and Jake, her slight frame radiating protective energy. I've lived here 40 years. I've seen this boy waiting politely for his friend every day. He's never caused problems for anyone. He's blocking the sidewalk with his presence. Karen gestured vaguely at Jake's midsection. People have to go around him. So do they when I use my walker. Should I be banned from public spaces too? The comparison clearly frustrated Karen, who had counted on community support for her crusade. That's completely different. You're elderly. You have legitimate mobility needs. And he's a child waiting for his friend. What's illegitimate about that? Karen's jaw worked soundlessly for several seconds before she exploded. Fine. If nobody else cares about community standards, then I'll handle this myself. She grabbed Jake's upper arm, fingers digging into soft flesh. You're coming with me to file a formal complaint with your parents. Let go of me, Jake said, trying to pull away. Karen's grip tightened painfully. Don't you dare walk away from me, young man. I am an officer of this community, and you will show proper respect. You're hurting me. I'm teaching you consequences. Karen began dragging Jake toward his house, ignoring his struggles and Margaret's protests. Maybe your mother needs to understand what kind of troublemaker she's raising. Jake planted his feet, trying to resist, but Karen was stronger and angrier. In her fury, she yanked his arm with such force that he stumbled forward, directly into her path. The collision sent them both off balance, but while Karen recovered quickly, Jake continued falling. What happened next occurred in slow motion, yet happened too fast to prevent. Karen, regaining her footing, saw Jake stumbling toward her and reacted with pure reflex and rage. Instead of helping steady the boy or stepping aside, she placed both hands against his shoulders and shoved with all her strength. Jake had no chance to break his fall. He flew backward, arms flailing uselessly, before crashing shoulder first into the concrete sidewalk. The impact drove the air from his lungs in a painful whoosh. His backpack cushioned his head, but his elbow scraped against the rough surface, immediately drawing blood. For several heartbeats, the neighborhood fell silent, except for Jake's labored breathing and a distant dog barking. Then, Margaret Patterson's voice cut through the stillness like a knife. How dare you! Karen stared down at Jake's prone form, reality beginning to penetrate her rage-induced haze. He ran into me. He attacked me. I was defending myself. From a 12-year-old boy, David Kim had returned, cell phone already recording. I saw the whole thing. Karen, you assaulted that child. I did not assault anyone. He was resisting lawful detention. Lawful detention. Margaret's walker clicked rapidly as she knelt beside Jake, checking his injuries with gentle hands. You're not a police officer. You're a neighborhood busybody with a clipboard. Jake sat up slowly, cradling his bleeding elbow. Tears traced silent paths down his cheeks, whether from pain or humiliation. Nobody could say. I want to go home, he whispered. Of course you do, sweetheart. Margaret helped him to his feet, shooting venomous glances at Karen. David, please keep recording while I walk Jake to his door. This isn't over, Karen called after them, her voice carrying desperate bravado. There will be an official report filed about this incident. The truth will come out. David lowered his phone, expression disgusted. The truth is already out, Karen, and you're not going to like where it leads. 24 hours later, David's phone recording had traveled much further than anyone expected. Sarah Morrison arrived home from her hospital shift to find Jake sitting at the kitchen table. Homework spread before him, but untouched. His bandaged elbow rested carefully on a folded towel, and his usual cheerful greeting was replaced by withdrawn silence. What happened to your arm, honey? Jake's explanation emerged in halting sentences, punctuated by long pauses. Sarah's expression darkened with each detail, her nursing instincts cataloging not just physical injuries, but emotional trauma. When Jake finished, she pulled him into a fierce hug. "I'm so sorry this happened to you, but I need you to understand something very important." She held him at arm's length, meeting his eyes. "None of this was your fault. You did nothing wrong." Karen said I was blocking the sidewalk. Maybe if I... No. Sarah's voice brooked no argument. A grown woman physically assaulted a child. There is no justification for that. None. After Jake went to bed, Sarah called her brother. Thomas Marshall was reviewing budget reports in his FBI director's office when his secure phone buzzed. Sarah rarely called during work hours, and never on the encrypted line reserved for family emergencies. "Tom, I need your help." 20 minutes later, Thomas had heard the full story and received David Kim's video via secure email. His jaw tightened as he watched Karen slam his nephew to the concrete, her voice clearly audible as she fabricated citations and made threats. "Has she been charged?" The local police said it's a community matter, best handled through HOA channels. They suggested I file a complaint with the Homeowners Association. Thomas's laugh held no humor. The same association that gave her the authority to patrol the neighborhood? "Tom, I don't want special treatment because of your job. I just want Jake to be safe in his own neighborhood." "Sarah, this goes beyond family protection. We're talking about someone who believes a fake badge gives her authority to physically assault children. Someone who fabricates official citations and threatens residents with legal consequences she has no power to impose." Thomas's voice grew harder. "Someone who represents a clear and present example of authority abuse that could escalate to serious violence." He paused, studying the video again. "Besides, this isn't special treatment. It's proper federal oversight of potential civil rights violations." 3 days later, Willowbrook Heights, HOA, announced a community safety briefing featuring special guest speakers from federal law enforcement. The timing seemed coincidental, coming just days after several residents had demanded action regarding recent neighborhood incidents. Karen arrived at the community center 40 minutes early, determined to control the narrative. She'd spent the weekend crafting detailed reports about Jake's pattern of aggressive behavior and escalating confrontations with community officials. In her version of events, she was a dedicated public servant, trying to maintain order while facing harassment from problem residents and their enablers. She positioned herself in the front row, badge prominently displayed, citation book open to pages of fabricated entries. When other residents filed in, she greeted them with professional nods and meaningful glances toward her official-looking paperwork. "Evening, Karen," said David Kim. Taking a seat several rows behind her, Margaret Patterson chose a spot directly across the aisle, Walker positioned where Karen couldn't avoid seeing it. At 7 o'clock sharp, HOA President Patricia Wong took the podium. "Thank you all for coming tonight. As you know, we've been working with federal authorities to enhance our community safety protocols." She gestured toward the side entrance. "Please welcome FBI Director Thomas Marshall." Karen's breath caught as a tall, distinguished man in a perfectly tailored suit entered the room. FBI Director, not some local agent or community liaison, the director himself. Thomas surveyed the assembled residents with the same analytical gaze he used for Senate committee hearings. When his eyes found Karen, they lingered for just a moment before moving on. "Good evening. I'm here because your community has become a case study in something we see far too often: the abuse of perceived authority." His voice carried the weight of decades in law enforcement. Someone who believes a title or badge gives them permission to threaten, intimidate, and physically assault citizens. Karen's stomach began churning. This wasn't the presentation she'd expected. 3 days ago, my office received evidence of civil rights violations occurring right here in Willowbrook Heights. Video evidence of an adult physically assaulting a 12-year-old child. Thomas activated a large screen behind the podium. I want everyone to see exactly what I'm talking about. David Kim's phone recording filled the screen in high definition. Karen's voice boomed through the sound system as she fabricated citations and threatened consequences. The room watched in silence as she grabbed Jake's arm, dragged him across the sidewalk, and finally slammed him to the concrete. When the video ended, Thomas let the silence stretch until it became unbearable. The woman in this video is Karen Hoffman, your HOA community safety officer. Every eye in the room turned toward Karen, who sat frozen in her front row seat. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, to explain the context, but her throat had closed completely. Ms. Hoffman, Thomas continued, has spent the past several days telling anyone who would listen that she was performing official duties when she assaulted my nephew. The revelation sent murmurs through the audience. Karen's head snapped up, eyes wide with sudden understanding. She claims to have official authority. She fabricates citations and threatens legal consequences. She physically assaults children while claiming to maintain community standards. Thomas's voice grew harder with each sentence. This represents a clear pattern of behavior that, if left unchecked, will escalate to more serious violence. Karen finally found her voice. Sir, there's been a misunderstanding. The boy was standing on a public sidewalk. Thomas's interruption cut like steel. My nephew was waiting for his friend, as he does every day. When you decided to physically assault him for the crime of existing while overweight. The blunt assessment hit like a physical blow. Karen's carefully constructed justifications crumbled as the FBI director laid bare her true motivations. I have authority as an HOA officer to maintain community standards, she protested weakly. You have no authority to touch another person without their consent. You have no authority to fabricate official citations. You have no authority to threaten legal consequences you cannot deliver. Thomas stepped closer to the edge of the stage, his presence commanding absolute attention. What you do have is a pattern of escalating aggression toward a child, documented evidence of assault, and the full attention of federal law enforcement. Patricia Wong cleared her throat. Director Marshall, what exactly are you saying? I'm saying that Ms. Hoffman's actions constitute multiple federal violations, civil rights violations, assault on a minor, filing false official reports. Thomas's gaze never left Karen's face. I'm also saying that she's demonstrated exactly the kind of unchecked authority abuse that leads to more serious crimes. He activated his phone, speaking briefly to someone on the other end. My agents are outside waiting for my signal. Ms. Hoffman will be placed under arrest tonight on federal charges of civil rights violations and assault of a minor. Karen shot to her feet, her chair clattering backward. This is harassment. You're using your position to target me because I disciplined your nephew. I'm using my position to address clear evidence of criminal behavior. Thomas's voice remained level, despite Karen's growing panic. The same evidence I would act on regardless of the victim's identity. You can't do this. I have rights. Yes, you do. The right to remain silent, the right to an attorney, the right to have your case heard before a federal judge. Thomas nodded toward the entrance as 3 FBI agents entered the room. You'll have ample opportunity to exercise those rights. As Agent Rodriguez approached with handcuffs, Karen made one final desperate play. This is politically motivated persecution. Everyone here knows I was just doing my job, maintaining community standards that benefit everyone. Her appeal fell on deaf ears. David Kim stood up, his voice cutting through Karen's protests. Your job was to patrol for violations, not assault children. You crossed that line the moment you put your hands on Jake. Margaret Patterson struggled to her feet, walker clicking against the floor. I've lived in this community for 40 years, and I've never seen anyone abuse their position the way you have. You're not a protector. You're a bully with a badge. Other residents began voicing their agreement, sharing stories of Karen's excessive citations, aggressive confrontations, and intimidation tactics. The community's true feelings about her reign of terror became clear as person after person spoke up. I was afraid to check my mail when her car was in the neighborhood, admitted elderly Robert Chen. She cited me for having grass clippings on my driveway 30 seconds after I finished mowing, said Jennifer Martinez. She threatened to have my teenager arrested for skateboarding on the sidewalk, added Michael Thompson. The stories painted a picture of systematic harassment that went far beyond Jake's assault. Karen had terrorized the entire community under the guise of maintaining standards. As Agent Rodriguez recited Miranda rights, Karen's composure finally shattered completely. This isn't fair. I was protecting this community. I was keeping property values high. I was maintaining order. You were abusing your position and terrorizing residents. Thomas replied simply, the community will be better protected without you. The agents escorted Karen from the room as she continued protesting her innocence and demanding to speak with lawyers, supervisors, and anyone else who might reverse this injustice. Her voice faded as the doors closed behind her. Thomas addressed the shaken community. I want everyone to understand that this arrest isn't about revenge or family favoritism. It's about accountability. When someone abuses even limited authority to harm others, especially children, law enforcement has an obligation to act. Patricia Wong nodded slowly. Director Marshall, what happens to our community now? You move forward with proper oversight and accountability measures. You ensure that anyone given authority over others has proper training, clear limitations, and regular evaluation. Thomas's expression softened slightly. You remember that community safety comes from mutual respect and cooperation, not from fear and intimidation. He paused, scanning the faces of residents who had lived in fear of Karen's citations and confrontations. And you make sure that every child in this neighborhood feels safe walking to school, waiting for friends, and simply existing in public spaces. The following weeks brought significant changes to Willowbrook Heights. Karen's arrest made national news as an example of HOA authority abuse, sparking broader conversations about community oversight and accountability. She was ultimately sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, followed by supervised probation that included mandatory anger management and community service. The HOA implemented new policies requiring background checks, training, and regular evaluations for all community officials. Patricia Wong announced that community safety would be handled by professional security firms with proper licensing and oversight, not volunteer residents with clipboards and attitudes. Jake returned to his daily routine of waiting by the lamppost for Marcus. But now, other neighborhood kids had joined their informal group. What had once been a solitary wait became a gathering place where children felt safe and welcome. Margaret Patterson often emerged from her house around 3:30, ostensibly to collect mail, but actually to chat with the kids and ensure their continued well-being. David Kim started a neighborhood watch program focused on actual community safety rather than citation enforcement. The group's first initiative was installing better lighting along walking paths and creating safe spaces for children to gather. Sarah Morrison found herself welcomed into the community in ways she'd never experienced during Karen's tenure. Neighbors who had previously avoided interaction out of fear of HOA retaliation now stopped to chat during evening walks. The community began functioning as an actual neighborhood rather than a surveillance state. Most importantly, Jake's confidence slowly returned. The trauma of being physically assaulted by an authority figure took time to heal. But therapy sessions and strong community support helped him process the experience. He learned that standing up to bullies sometimes brings unexpected allies, and that having powerful family connections mattered less than having neighbors who cared about doing what was right. Thomas visited regularly, not as the FBI director, but as Uncle Tom, who brought board games and helped with math homework. During one Saturday afternoon visit, Jake asked him why he'd made such a public example of Karen's arrest. Because bullies count on people looking the other way, Thomas explained as they set up a chessboard. They count on victims being too afraid or ashamed to speak up. They count on communities being too divided to support each other. He moved his opening pawn. When someone abuses their authority to harm others, especially children, it has to be addressed publicly and decisively. Otherwise, it sends the message that such behavior is acceptable. But some people think you only arrested her because I'm your nephew. Some people will always look for excuses to avoid confronting uncomfortable truths. Thomas studied the board thoughtfully. The evidence was clear. The crime was documented. The pattern of abuse was established. Any law enforcement officer worth their badge would have acted on that evidence, regardless of family connections. Jake moved his own pawn. Considering this, Margaret says Karen's behavior was getting worse. That eventually she would have seriously hurt someone. Margaret's probably right. Authority abuse typically escalates over time unless it's checked by consequences. Thomas captured Jake's pawn with a gentle smile. Your assault was documented and witnessed, which made prosecution possible. But if we hadn't acted, the next victim might not have been as fortunate. The conversation was interrupted by Marcus arriving for their weekly chess tournament, followed shortly by 3 other neighborhood kids who had heard about the ongoing matches. What had started as uncle-nephew time had evolved into impromptu community gatherings that brought together children and adults in ways Karen's enforcement regime had never allowed. As autumn deepened into winter, Jake's daily routine expanded beyond waiting for Marcus. He began tutoring younger kids who struggled with reading, sharing his love of books in the same patient way his mother shared her nursing knowledge. The community discovered that the troublemaker Karen had targeted was actually a thoughtful, gentle boy who contributed positivity to everyone around him. Margaret Patterson often remarked that Karen's downfall had revealed the community's true character. We were all walking on eggshells, afraid to connect with each other because any interaction might result in citations or confrontations. She told Patricia Wong during one HOA meeting, "Now that we're not living in fear, we're actually becoming the close-knit community we always wanted to be." The final chapter of Karen's story came 6 months later when she was released early for good behavior and required to perform community service. Her assignment working with a nonprofit organization that provided anti-bullying education to schools and community groups. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, but several residents noted that she seemed genuinely changed by her experience. She approached Jake and Sarah at a community picnic, hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "I want to apologize for what I did to you. Jake, there's no excuse for my behavior. I let my need for control override basic human decency, and I hurt you badly." Jake looked up at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Thank you for saying that." He replied quietly, "I forgive you." Karen's eyes filled with tears. "I'm working with counselors to understand why I became so angry and controlling. I'm learning that real community safety comes from people feeling welcome and protected, not monitored and threatened." She didn't ask for her old position back. She didn't make excuses or minimize her actions. She simply acknowledged the harm she'd caused and committed to doing better. It was, perhaps, the first genuinely honest thing she'd said to the community in years. As summer returned to Willowbrook Heights, the lamppost where Jake had been assaulted became the unofficial heart of the neighborhood. Children gathered there after school. Parents paused to chat during evening walks, and elderly residents found convenient spots to rest and socialize. The space that had once been a battleground for authority and control became a symbol of community resilience and growth. Jake, now 13 and more confident, continued his routine of meeting friends and helping younger kids. But he also began advocating for other children who faced bullying or discrimination. His experience with Karen had taught him that speaking up against authority abuse required courage. But that courage could inspire others to act as well. Thomas visited less frequently as Jake grew older and more independent. But their relationship remained strong. During one of their last chess matches, Jake asked his uncle what he'd learned from the Karen situation. "I learned that real authority comes from serving others, not controlling them," Thomas replied, moving his queen into position. "I learned that communities are only as strong as their most vulnerable members. And I learned that sometimes the most important arrests happen not in international terrorism cases or corporate corruption investigations, but when someone with a clipboard and a badge decides that a 12-year-old boy has no right to exist peacefully in his own neighborhood." Jake smiled, executing a combination that would checkmate his uncle in 3 moves. "I learned that having powerful family doesn't matter as much as having neighbors who care about doing what's right." "That's a much better lesson than mine," Thomas admitted, studying the board with resignation. "And apparently, you've also learned to play chess well enough to consistently beat an FBI director." "Uncle Tom." "Yeah. Thanks for making sure Karen couldn't hurt other kids the way she hurt me." Thomas reached across the board to squeeze his nephew's shoulder. "Thank you for being brave enough to stand up to her, even when it was scary. That's what real courage looks like." As evening settled over Willowbrook Heights, children's laughter echoed from the lamppost gathering spot. Elderly residents enjoyed peaceful walks without fear of citations, and families connected with neighbors in ways that felt natural and welcoming. The community had learned that true safety came not from enforcement and intimidation, but from mutual respect, shared responsibility, and the courage to protect each other from those who would abuse their authority. Karen's assault on Jake Morrison had been intended to establish dominance and control. Instead, it had revealed the power of community solidarity and the importance of holding authority figures accountable for their actions. In trying to make one boy smaller, she had ultimately made the entire neighborhood stronger. The lamppost still stood on Maple Grove Avenue, no longer a symbol of conflict, but a reminder that when communities choose courage over fear, justice over convenience, and protection over control, even the most vulnerable among them can stand tall and unafraid.